Okay, so let's unpack. Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're doing something completely different.
Yeah, completely different from the usual.
Right, because usually we look at, a stack of articles from the past week or maybe a new book release. But today we are essentially stepping into a time.
It really does feel like that. We're looking at a primary source document, a full unedited transcript from February 2026.
February 2026. So we are projecting ourselves into the future for this deep dive. And the setting is, well, it's highly specific. It's the United States Institute of Peace in Washington, D.C. And the speaker is President Donald Trump in the second year of his second term.
Exactly. And it's important to note right off the bat, this isn't a campaign rally. It's not a standard press conference either. It is the inaugural meeting of something he has christened the Board of Peace.
The Board of Peace. I have to be honest, when I first saw that title in the document, it sounded like something out of a comic book, like the Justice League.
It does have a very cinematic ring to it, doesn't it? But according to this text, it is very real. He describes it as the most consequential board in terms of power and prestige in the entire world.
Yeah, he claims there is absolutely nothing even close to it.
Right.
And the people in the room, and we're going to get to the guest list because it is just wild. But the stakes in this speech are incredibly high. This isn't just, a ribbon cutting for a new committee.
No, not at all.
Embedded right in this speech is an ultimatum to Iran with a literal 10-day deadline ticking down. And a claim, which I think is going to take up a massive chunk of our time today, that his administration has settled 8 wars in a single year.
8 wars in 12 months.
That is a staggering number. I mean, if it's true, it redefines modern history. So here is our mission for you, the listener, on today's deep dive. We have one single source, just this unedited transcript of his address.
And we are going to decode exactly what this Board of Peace is, who is sitting at the table, and how this specific brand of what he calls transactional diplomacy is allegedly reshaping the globe.
Right. And just a quick disclaimer before we really jump in, because obviously this is politically charged material. Our goal here today is to analyze the content of the speech purely as a text.
Exactly. We are looking at the president's reported action, the specific worldview he's presenting, and the anecdotes he shares to understand the narrative he's constructed.
We aren't here to endorse the politics from the left or the right. We're just here to understand the mechanics of the world described in this primary document.
We're looking at the how and the what.
Exactly. So let's start with the setting. It's February 2020, and before he talks about the economic backdrop, he talks about money.
Because in the worldview presented here, you really can't have one without the other.
It is the absolute foundation of everything he discussed. He starts by throwing out numbers that, frankly, would make a traditional economist's head. He claims that in the first year of this term, the economic markers have just blown past every expert prediction.
He gets highly specific. He says, quote, "We broke 50,000 on the Dow."
50,000. Let's just pause on that for a second. For anyone listening who doesn't watch the Financial Channel, put that in perspective. Where are we?
Well, historically speaking, breaking 30,000, massive mile, and breaking 40,000 was seen as this long-term eventual goal. To hit 50,000.
Yeah.
That implies a level of growth that is almost vertical. It suggests an economy that is running incredibly, almost unsustainably hot.
And he knows it sounds crazy. He actually references the what he calls the wall geniuses.
The sarcasm there is just palpable in the transcript. He talks about these geniuses telling him that hitting 45,000 would take 4 or 5 years.
Or that it was totally impossible.
Right. He says they told him, you can't do that. And his retort in the speech is essentially, I did it in 1 year.
He also mentions the S&P 500 breaking 7,000.
Which he notes was actually tougher to do than the...
Why is that? Exactly.
Because the S&P is a much broader basket of stock. It's significantly harder to move that needle. Moving the Dow can happen if just a few big industrial companies have a great quarter. But moving the S&P to 7,000 implies that absolutely everyone is making money. Tech, retail, energy, the whole board.
So the framing here right out of the gate is the experts were wrong, I was right, and the country is richer than it has ever been.
Right. And that wealth is the fuel. He frames this economic boom as the very thing that allows the U.S. to project power globally. He essentially says, we rebuilt the country in the first term, we fixed the cash flow, and now we can afford to dictate terms to the rest of the world.
But he's not doing it alone. This speech gives us a really fascinating look at the personnel around him. He calls it the best team ever assembled.
And the dynamics he describes, it reads almost like a reality show cast, but they have the nuclear code. Let's look at the vice president, J.D. Vance.
The description of Vance is fascinating because it focuses so heavily on raw intelligence. Trump clearly loves credentials when they suit his narrative. He mentions Vance graduated from Ohio State in 2 years.
2 years? Is that even practically possible?
Only if you literally never sleep, I imagine. And then Yale Law. But then, and this is honestly my favorite human moment in the early part of the transcript, he brings up Vance's wife, Usha.
Oh, this part was great.
Mm.
He says Usha was marginally ahead of JD at Yale.
He does. He makes this joke that he's uncomfortable saying JD was first in his class, so he frames it as JD was first and Usha was second. Or Usha.
It's this weirdly competitive compliment.
It really is. He says he married the person that was marginally ahead. It's such a glimpse into how the speaker views relationship success.
He respects Vance for being brilliant, but he also respects him for marrying someone who might be even smarter. It's all about winning, even in a marriage dynamic.
He also characterizes Vance's role in the administration in a way that genuinely surprised usually the vice president, the guy who smooths things over behind.
Not here. Trump describes Vance as the one who needs to be slowed down. He says he speaks his mind. It paints a picture of Vance as the attack dog, the accelerator.
And Trump actually positions himself as the moderate influence, saying, I have to slow him down a little.
That is a staggering thought for some people, I'm sure. If Trump is the brake pedal, how fast is the car actually?
Precisely. And then to balance that out, you have the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio.
Velvet.
That's the exact phrase in the text. Trump says Rubio achieves the same kill, and notice that language, kill, it's very predatory for a diplomat, but he does it with a velvet glove. He's the smooth operator.
But speaking of smooth operators, we absolutely have to talk about the building, the USIP building itself where this is taking place. There is this anecdote in the speech that is just classic storytelling.
Oh, the naming rights story.
Yes. So they are in this beautiful building at the Institute of Peace, and Trump claims that nobody knew what to name it. There was this massive bureaucratic struggle over the naming right.
And he says Marco Rubio just claimed it.
He claimed it and allegedly named it after Trump.
And Trump swears up and down in the speech, I had nothing to do with it. I swear I didn't.
He says when they told him there was a surprise, he thought they were going to give him cash.
Could always use some extra cash. That's the direct quote. The president of the United States joking to world leaders about needing pocket money.
It's very disarming humor. But look at the underlying power move there. He says Rubio took the building away from 5 groups that wanted it.
It shows Rubio as someone who can just maneuver through the Washington bureaucracy, cut out the competition, and deliver a prize directly to his boss.
It reinforces loyalty. Rubio got the building for Trump.
It perfectly sets the stage. You have the genius attack dog in Vance and the loyal, smooth operator in Rubio. But then you have a third figure introduced, someone who might not be a household name for everyone listening, but in this Board of Peace universe, he seems to be the absolute limit. Steve Witkoff.
Steve Witkoff, the special envoy for peace. Now, for listeners who don't track this closely, Witkoff isn't a career diplomat. He didn't come up through the State Department or the Kennedy School of Government.
He's a real estate developer from New York.
A developer negotiating global peace treaty.
And Trump explicitly compares him to Henry Kissinger. He calls him Henry Kissinger Jr. that doesn't leak.
Which is such a hilarious dig at the original Kissinger.
Trump takes this massive detour in the speech just to complain about Kissinger leaking. He says Nixon told him, I wonder who leaks, and it was Kissinger the whole time.
But the core point he's making about Witkoff isn't about historical grievance. It's about trust and personal chemistry.
He tells a story about sending Witkoff to meet Vladimir Putin.
This is the defining anecdote for Witkoff in the text. Trump says he sent Steve to see Putin. He expected it to be a quick hello, maybe drop off a formal letter and leave.
And it went for 4 hours.
4 solid hours. Trump says that's talent. He heavily emphasizes that Witkoff, a guy who basically builds skyscrapers, can sit down with an ex-KGB agent like Putin or with President Zelensky, and they, quote, all love.
What does that tell us about the president's view of diplomacy in this document?
It tells us that he thinks diplomacy is exactly like commercial real estate. It's not about international law or protocols or historical border disputes. It's about 2 guys in a room.
Do they like each other? Can they hash out a deal?
Exactly. He believes that a developer is fundamentally better equipped to end a war than a trained diplomat because a developer understands leverage, margins, and closing the deal.
Which brings us perfectly to the main event, the Board of Peace itself. This isn't just a catchy campaign slogan. He describes it as a physical assembly of leaders sitting right there in the...
Fascinating structural concept. He frames the Board of Peace as an alternative, or perhaps a supervisor, to the United Nations. He explicitly says the UN has not lived up to potential.
Not lived up to potential is a very polite corporate way of saying he thinks it's largely useless.
Effectively, yes. He says the board, in sharp contrast, is composed of sovereign nations taking direct responsibility for their own regions.
It's not a debating society where you pass non-binding resolutions that everyone ignores.
Right. It's a group of heavy hitters who can actually move armies and manipulate global economies.
And the roll call, I really want to go through some of the names he drops here because it fundamentally clarifies Trump considers people on the globe. It's not the traditional West allies.
No, it's like the Avengers of the populist right and the strongman world.
He starts with Javier Milei from Argentina.
Right. The chainsaw candidate. And Trump takes full, unabashed credit for Miley's success. He says Milei was behind in the polls, then Trump endorsed him. He says, I endorse when I like people, and suddenly Milei wins in a massive landslide.
He's claiming the Trump bump is now a verified global phenomenon.
Exactly. Then you have Viktor Orban from Hungary.
A highly controversial figure in European politics.
And Trump gives him a total and complete endorsement right there from the podium.
Sure.
He specifically praises Orban's strict immigration policies. He actually acknowledges, I know not everybody in Europe loves that endorsement, but he simply doesn't care.
He views Orban as a kindred spirit, someone who puts his own nation first, critics.
Then we move over to Asia, Prabowo Subianto of Indonesia.
This one is interesting. He calls him a tough cookie.
A tough cookie. And smart.
Trump seems obsessed with the scale here. He emphasizes several times that Prabowo represents over 240 million.
He is incredibly impressed by the sheer size of that constituency. It validates Prabowo's power in Trump's side. Big numbers mean big power.
And then, just for some added flavor, he mentions President Peña of Paraguay.
The young and handsome one.
I genuinely laughed out loud reading this part. He points to him and says, he's young and handsome. That doesn't mean we have to like you. I don't like young, handsome men.
It's like a Friars Club roast. He's roasting these sovereign world leaders while they're sitting right there in the front row.
But notice the power dynamic at play. He can roast them because he is the undisputed alpha in the room. He is the convener of the board. They are there, essentially, to kiss the ring.
He calls it endorsement diplomacy. He claims his endorsements are now determining outcomes in foreign elections, and he cites Argentina and Japan as proof.
It is a projection of soft power, but a very specific, personalized kind. He is saying, I'm the global kingmaker. If you are on the board of peace, you have the Trump seal of approval.
And the clear implication is that this personal, almost fraternal network is what actually solves conflicts. If you're in the club, you don't fight other club members.
Yeah. So let's get right into the fighting, because this is the headline. This is the part of the speech where the claims go from political boasting to historical rewrite. He claims to have settled 8 wars in one single year.
8 wars.
Count, and he thinks a 9th is basically on the way to being solved. So how? How do you settle 8 wars in a year? The transcript gives us a highly detailed look at his methodology, and the prime example he uses is India and Pakistan.
This is by far the most detailed case study in the entire speech, and it is absolutely wild to read.
Set the scene for us based on the text.
So he describes an acute crisis between India and Pakistan. He mentions that Prime Minister Sharif of Pakistan is right there in the room, so he's telling this story directly to his face.
Right.
He says there was a situation where planes were being shot down. He specifically mentions 11 jets were shot down.
11 jets. That's not a minor border skirmish. That's an active air war.
That is a full-blown escalating conflict. Yeah. And he claims 25 million lives were at immediate risk. We are talking about 2 nuclear-armed powers standing right on the brink of mutual destruction.
Now, in a traditional administration, what usually happens in that scenario?
The Secretary of State immediately flies to Geneva or the region. The UN Security Council convenes an emergency session. There are weeks of agonizing shuttle diplomacy. Temporary ceasefires are negotiated. They get broken. They try again.
And what does the transcript say, Trump?
He picked up the telephone. He calls it transactional diplomacy. He got on the phone with both leaders, and he didn't talk about peace. He didn't talk about the disputed borders or human rights.
He talked about tariffs.
He talked about tariffs. He told them, I'm not doing trade deals with you two guys if you don't settle this up. He explicitly threatened 200% tariffs on both countries.
Wait, so he threatened to entirely tank their national economies if they didn't stop shooting at each other?
Effectively, yes. He says one of them, he carefully doesn't say which one. Said, no, you can't do that. Like, that's not how global trade works.
In Trump's response?
His response is just, yes, I can.
It's weaponized.
It absolutely is. He says when it came to losing a lot of money, they don't want to fight. He claims the entire conflict was settled in 2 or 3 days.
2 days to stop a potential nuclear war.
Because, in his stated view, money is vastly more important than ideology. He's completely bypassing the political grievances, the religious differences, the historical hatred, and he is just making war a terrible business decision. He monetized the peace process.
It's breathtakingly simple and also, frankly, kind of terrifying if you think about the precedent. It implies that the only thing holding the world back from Armageddon is access to the U.S. market.
That is exactly the implication he's making. If you lose access to the American wallet, your country dies. You stop fighting.
There is another story in here that I found even more cinematic. The 30-year, he doesn't name the countries, but looking at the guest list, he mentions the leaders of Armenia and Azerbaijan are there and have become friends. Seems highly likely it's them.
That fits the timeline he mentions perfect, fighting for 30-plus years. The Nagorno-Karabakh conflict aligns with that.
Describe the Oval Office scene he paints on. It needs like a movie script.
It really does. He has the two leaders together in the Oval Office. He says they were sitting on completely opposite sides of the room because they've been killing each other for 32 years. They despise each other. The tension in the room is physical.
And he doesn't call in a trained mediator?
No. He becomes the mediator physically. He says, folks, could you get a little closer? He describes actually inching their chairs together. Get a little closer. A little closer.
It's a literal parent trap. He's pushing them together until they basically have to touch.
He claims that after 1 hour of this, they were sitting right next to each other, they hugged, and they signed a comprehensive deal in 24 hours.
They hug. These are leaders of nations that have been slaughtering each other for a generation.
It sounds totally absurd to traditional diplomatic ear, but it fits the Board of Peace philosophy perfectly. It's entirely personal. Trump believes that if he can just get these guys in a room and apply the pressure of his own personality, just the sheer suffocating force of being Donald Trump, he can force a resolution.
He breaks the ice. He forces the hug. He gets the deal signed.
He also rattles off a few other regional fixes. Cambodia and Thailand.
He calls them nasty fighters.
Quote, you talk nasty fighter, you're nice guys compared to this.
Again, that deep admiration for tough aggression. But he says he settled it. Then he mentions the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam between Egypt.
That's a massive geopolitical. It's about water rights to the entire Nile River.
Huge. And he just glosses over it like, yeah, we got the water to the Nile. It's done. He ticks these historical conflicts off like items on a grocery. Save the Nile. Check that box. Next.
But all of these, India, Pakistan, Ethiopia, Armenia, they are just the warm-up acts in this speech because we have to talk about the Middle East. This is the section of the transcript where the tone shifts noticeably. It gets much heavier.
Much heavier. He talks about Gaza and Iran. Let's start with Gaza. In this timeline, February 2026, he declares the war over.
He says there are little flames left, but effectively the war is done. And he makes a massive definitive claim about the hostages.
He says all hostages have been returned.
Living and dead. And this is a rare moment where the transactional Trump steps back for a second and we see a glimpse of something else. He talks about the last 20 hostages. He says getting them was very, very tough.
He tells that specific story about the parent.
He does. He says the parents of the deceased hostages, the ones who already knew for a fact their children were dead, wanted the bodies back just as desperately as the parents of the living wanted their children. It's very visceral, surprisingly human detail for this kind of speech. It acknowledges the raw grief of the situation.
He actually credits Hamas or Tamas as it appears transcribed in the text.
I think that's likely a slip of the tongue or maybe some nickname he's invented. It's hard to tell from just the text.
Right. But he credits them with doing the grueling work to dig and find those bodies. But then almost immediately, the tone shifts back and he pivots to the reconstruction. And this is where the Board of Peace concept really flexes its financial muscle. Because the question is, who is paying for all this rebuilding?
And the answer is not the American taxpayer, at least not fully. He lists the coalition that stepped up. Kazakhstan, Azerbaijan, the UAE, Morocco, Bahrain, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Uzbekistan, and Kuwait.
That is a truly fascinating list of nations. You have the wealthy Gulf states, which you'd expect, but you also have these Central Asian former Soviet republics.
It's the Trump network in action. He says they raised $7 billion from these regional partners to rebuild Gaza.
And what was the U.S. contribution?
The U.S. pledged $10 billion, but, and this is the key sales pitch to his base list, Trump justifies it by saying it's exactly the cost of 2 weeks of fighting.
Nothing is less expensive than peace.
That's the core slogan. He's selling peace to a skeptical American audience by framing it purely as a cost-saving measure, saying, look, writing a one-time check for $10 billion is vastly cheaper than funding a proxy war for another 12 months. It's fiscal responsibility achieved via diplomacy.
But then we get the cameo that I still cannot quite believe is in this transcript.
FIFA.
Gianni Infantino, Johnny, the head of soccer.
Trump clearly loves him. He says Gianni is pledging $75 million from FIFA to build soccer fields in Gaza.
Wait, just pause and picture this. The head of FIFA is sitting at a nuclear security summit with world leaders.
That is the genius, or maybe the madness, of this Board of Peace setup. Trump treats absolutely everyone as a stakeholder. If you have money and global influence, you are on the board. He doesn't care if you're a prime minister or a sports executive.
If you can write a check for $75 million, you get a...
It's so surreal. You're talking about rebuilding a devastated war zone, and you have the World Cup guy there measuring out dimensions for goalposts.
But it fits the developer vision. Make Gaza great again. Bring in the high-end developers, bring in the international sports, bring in the money.
But And this is the massive turning point in the speech. Trump is very, very clear that none of this peace, none of this regional reconstruction would have happened without what he calls the heavy hitter, the pivot to Iran.
This is the moment in reading the transcript where the air just sort of leaves the room.
We have to be very precise about what he claims here, because he isn't talking about tariffs anymore. He isn't talking about economic sanctions or freezing assets.
No, he is talking about the spirit stealth.
He says, and I quote, "It went into Iran and it totally decimated the nuclear potential."
Totally decimated. And he uses the past tense. This isn't a threat of what he might do if they cross a red line. He is telling this room full of world leaders that the United States has already conducted a direct, devastating military strike on Iran.
Let's just process that for a second. He bombed Iran.
According to the claims, yes. He even admits he never really understood the B-2 bomber before. He has this what funny line where he says he looks at it and says, "It's a wing, I don't get it." But he fully acknowledges its devastating effect.
He says that specific kinetic military action is what removed the black cloud hanging over the entire Middle East.
His argument is that nations like Saudi Arabia and Qatar couldn't safely sign peace deals as long as they lived in fear of a nuclear-armed Iran. By decimating that potential, he forcefully unlocked the...
It's the ultimate escalation to achieve de-escalation. He's effectively saying, we broke their most dangerous toy. We took the gun off the table by force. Now everyone feels safe enough to talk.
But you have to acknowledge, that's not soft power. That's not the art of that is an act of war.
It is extreme kinetic action. And this is the central paradox of the entire speech. He calls this gathering the Board of Peace, but he is framing the region's peace as the direct, undeniable result of overwhelming, demonstrated American violence. He says the black cloud is gone, specifically because he blew it up.
And that leads us to the title of our deep dive today, The Ultimatum. Because the story with Iran isn't over just because the bombers flew.
No, it's just entering a new phase. He says to the room, you're going to be finding out over the next probably 10 days.
10 days.
He sets a stark binary choice for the Iranian regime. He says they must make a meaningful deal, which in this context clearly implies a total surrender of any remaining nuclear ambitions and likely a massive change in their regional proxy behavior, or
bad things will happen.
Bad things will happen. Sounds vague, but coming just 3 sentences after he openly bragged about using a B-2 stealth bomber, it's terrifyingly specific.
It's a ticking countdown clock.
It is. He also casually mentions that Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff are currently having good meetings with Iranian representatives.
So, in the reality of this, we are right in the middle of a high-stakes countdown. B-2 strike has allegedly happened, the nuclear capacity, and now Iran has 10 days to surrender to this new diplomatic reality or face further destruction.
It radically reframes the word, it's peace, through overwhelming, unquestioned superiority. It's not kumbaya. It's surrender or else.
It's peace because the only alternative is physical destruction, total bang.
Let's zoom out a bit from the specific conflicts. We've covered the wars, the bombs, the tariffs, but I want to talk about the international institution because in most modern presidencies, the UN is the absolute center of the diplomatic world. Here, it feels like a neglected side project.
It really does. But interestingly, he's not withdrawing the U.S. from the UN. He's not burning the building down.
No, he says the Board of Peace will basically look over the UN.
Look over? It sounds almost like a hostile corporate takeover. Like the Board of Peace is the new board of directors, and the UN has been demoted to middle management.
He does promise financial support, though. He says the U.S. will help them money-wise to fix their facility.
Which, again, is the real estate developer and him talking. Their building is falling apart. We'll throw them some cash to fix the lobby. But he clearly views the Board of Peace as the senior partner in global affairs. The UN is where countries go to complain. The board is where the actual shareholders of global power decide what happens.
Speaking of global institutions and prestige, we have to talk about the Nobel Prize. There is this incredible tangent in the speech about Norway.
The Norway surprise. This is classic Trump stream of consciousness. He says he got a note that Norway was hosting the next event for the Board of...
And his brain immediately jumps to one very specific conclusion.
He thought, finally, I'm getting the Nobel Peace Prize.
He says, finally, they got it right. He was completely ready to accept.
And then what happened?
Then someone clarified that they were just hosting a meeting. There was no prize.
Oh, this is less exciting.
But he spins it masterfully. He says he doesn't care about prizes. He only cares about saving lives. Quote, I want to save lives. I don't care about the prize.
But then, literally a minute later, he brings up FIFA again.
The FIFA Peace Prize.
Yes. He says Gianni Infantino gave him a peace prize because he saw that the president got screwed by Norway.
It's a funny, lighthearted moment, but it's incredibly revealing psychologically.
Yeah.
He desperately wants the validation. He wants the physical trophy. And if the Nobel Committee won't give it to him, he'll happily take one from the head of global soccer.
It's also worth noting the geopolitical shift there. Norway, a very traditional liberal Western European democracy, is hosting this Board of Peace meeting.
That is a highly significant detail to drop. Yeah. It suggests that even the traditional European powers are bending the knee to this new structure. They see where the actual power lies now, and they want to host the party, even if it bypasses their usual channel.
So we've unpacked a lot of this. We've looked at the dream team of Vance and Rubio, the transactional diplomacy of threatening tariffs, the B-2 bomber strikes, and the FIFA Peace Prize. It is a massive amount of information to digest.
It is incredibly dense text. It presents a world that is radically, fundamentally different from the one we've been used to for the last 70 years.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to circle back to the core philosophy. Trump says, nothing is less expensive than peace.
That is the thesis statement of the entire doc. If you take one thing away from this analysis, it's that single sentence. He is trying to sell peace not just as a moral imperative, though he does mention saving lives, but as a strict fiscal necessity.
War wastes money. War disrupts global trade.
Therefore, as a businessman, he is fundamentally against prolonged war, and he is willing to use the absolute harshest tools of business hostile takeovers, threats of national bankruptcy through tariffs, and even extreme corporate restructuring like B-2 bombers to enforce market stability.
It's a world where diplomacy is conducted primarily through personal, one-on-one relationships among strongman leaders. You don't have treaties anymore. You have deals. You don't have multilateral summits. You have meetings with Steve Witkoff.
Precisely. It's personal, it's highly transactional, and above all, it's incredibly fast.
Yeah.
He emphasizes speed over and over. The expert said it would take 4 years. We did it in 1. The war lasted 30 years. We fixed it in 24 hours.
So here is a final provocative thought for you to mull over after. We are looking at a snapshot of a world where 25 million lives were allegedly saved in India and Pakistan, not by careful negotiation, but by a blunt threat of tariff. Where a 30-year war ended because the president physically moved some chairs closer together, where the Middle East is being rebuilt by a coalition of non-Western nations writing massive checks.
When you list it like that, it sounds like a diplomatic golden age.
But it's also a world where B-2 stealth bombers are the required preamble to a negotiation, where the president of the United States can threaten to instantly bankrupt a sovereign nation on a brief phone call, and where a 10-day clock is ticking down on Iran with vaguely defined bad things waiting at the end of it.
The ultimate question you have to ask is, does the end justify the means?
If the result is stopping the daily carnage, do we accept a world where traditional rules-based diplomacy is entirely replaced by ultimatums and boss-level management? Does the resulting stability justify the authoritarian method?
That is the exact question this text forces us to confront. Is the Board of Peace a sustainable, long-term model for the future of the globe? Or is it just a fragile house of cards held together entirely by one man's sheer personality and a fleet of stealth bombers?
And what actually happens when those 10 days run out?
That is the million-dollar question.
Something to explore on your own. We will leave you with that image of the clock ticking down. Thank you for diving deep with us today.
Always a pleasure.